Hello, I'm Polly Forcier, owner of MB Historic Decor in Quechee, Vermont. Welcome to this instructional video on how to paint a mural in the Rufus Porter style. It is my hope that you will attempt to paint one of your own once you see how to lay in the background and the hand-painted details. The easy and exciting part is developing the scene using stencils recorded from historic walls painted by Porter and his students in New Hampshire in the 1820s. The first step is to have in mind what you want to put on the wall. Here we have a sketch inspired by elements from Rufus Porter walls. Some people may have the technology to project a picture or a drawing onto the wall. I'm just going to sketch mine. This sketch is drawn to scale. I've used 1 inch to 1 foot. Therefore, the sketch is 6 inches high and 10 inches wide, and the wall is 6 feet tall and 10 feet wide. We're not going to paint below the windowsill. The trees to the left and the right will frame the entire picture, drawing the eye to the center. There's a window on the left, and I will just probably put a little tree up the side of the window, a skinny little tree, to balance the entire picture. One thing to remember is that the water should not be at the midpoint of the mural. It should be at shoulder height. You can use your sketch either as a template and be very accurate with it, or you can use it as a point from which to begin your mural and develop it more or less freely as you go along, and that would be more my style of painting. Prepare your wall by taping the ceiling, the sides of the adjacent walls, and the woodwork of your window with a wide painter's tape, and lay a drop cloth on the floor. I have a clipboard for making notes as I go. Then I have a line that Seth and I are going to snap to make a horizon line, and a tape that I need to measure with, and charcoal that I need to sketch in my design with. I may have to drop a line to show myself how straight to lay something. So I've got a piece of thread here, and I'll weight it with something. I've taped around the wall with painter's tape, and I have some little cups to put different paints in. These are the sealers, the Josanya sealers that are used for various purposes with the paint. This all-purpose sealer I'll be using when I stencil, for instance, the hull of a boat that will have another color on top of it, because the hull will be black and we'll want the stripes, which are yellow and red, to be of pure color and not to pick up the black that's underneath. So this is a stroke and blending medium which I'll be mixing with the paint when I blend 2 colors, for instance the sky and the sunset. The flow medium will help extend the paint when I'm using a fine brush to make details, and the clyster will make the paint somewhat transparent, and I'll be using that with the clouds. There are about 12 or 13 colors that we recommend from our palette of colors to use with the Rufus Porter stencils. They are the colors that were more or less used in the originals, and this is a palette knife that you'll need to mix them with the mediums. I use some baby wipes just to clean my fingers or clean my brushes at times, and also paper towels. I've started to mix some paint for the sunset, or the sunrise in this case, I guess, since it's on the east wall. This is a spritzer that I use to kind of keep my paint a little wet if it's going to be resting a while. Some sponges for foliage. This is my cloud brush. And these are the brushes that we're selling at the moment for stenciling. They are Copenhagen gold brushes, the large one and the small one. This is just a collection of brushes that I've had over the years. Some are better than others, but when you're just doing a little tiny something on a boat, any poor brush will do. and I'll probably use maybe 15 or so of these. While I'm using the brush and I'm coming back to it, I will slip it into a plastic bag to keep it from drying out. And then I have some jars in case I wanted to save some of the paints. This is sort of a life's collection of tiny brushes and brushes that I might use for foliage or bushing brushes. The same with all of these. These are the 5 brushes that you can get from MB Historic Decor, and as far as the fine work on all of the stencils goes, it can be accomplished with all of these 5 brushes. One that is also useful is a fan brush, and you can apply it to the wall in a downward motion like this for foliage, and then with the small brush you can put in the little stems of the trees or bushes that you would be painting. Other than that, I have an old brush that I used to use for oil painting, which is perfect for bushing, which means stabbing it onto the wall to make little dots, like it on the tops of hillsides or hedgerows. That works well for that. And then this other odd assortment of brushes, the older the better, would be for large foliage like an elm tree or maple trees that you just would simply knock in the foliage by touching the wall with the ends of these bristles. The older the better. This is a cutting brush to make a straight line when I'm painting, and then use these big brushes just to wipe out the bubbles after you've used the roller and to lay in some of the foreground. This small brush would be used for fine detail such as the tails on the cows and the ears on the fox. And then this script brush is used for the edging of the trees and the limbs for the light and the dark. Rigging, perhaps, if you don't want to use a pen. These 2 brushes are used for the foliage. This is the oval glaze brush, which is used to paint vines across the top. These are the stencils I may or may not use, but I'll probably use most of them. There will be small boats on the horizon and maybe an apple tree, a single apple tree, a larger boat, a little sailboat with a man in it. This is a rather large red house that I'm planning to use. This is a cluster of 3 buildings, which I'll put on the island, and these are animals that I definitely will use. The horizon line will be snapped here, and then another one underneath the window, because that was the way Rufus Porter did it. This window is a little lower because it's a modern window, but he usually snapped the line at the windowsill, which is about 32 or 34 inches above the floor. So we're going to snap another line here. Okay, find a helper to snap a line with you. The top line will be for the horizon line, which is where the water is in this case, and the lower one will be at the level of the chair rail or the windowsill. I looked on my shelves the other day and I found that I had some paints already that I could use. This is a yellow ochre that I'm kind of fond of, and that will be a strong color for the foreground. Then I went and had 3 other colors mixed, and this is going to be our palette of colors. And there's a gray here, which will be the sky. And the thing you have to remember with acrylic paints is that they dry 2 shades darker than when they are wet in the can. So the sky color will be a bit grayer as it dries. At times I'll be adding some white to some of these to lighten them, but at times I'll want the full strength of color as it is in the can. Then I chose some background colors from our collection that I may or may not use. I'm very fond of the Dove Gray. And then there's a background color which is kind of in the yellow-green family that I've already chosen. And this one is Primrose, which is also in the gold family, and that will probably be useful too at some point. I like to prepare all my background sky colors at once before I begin. So I'm going to start by pouring this gray Now the idea with this spray is just to get it on as fast as you can. I'm mixing what I want to be the sunrise. That's my eastern wall. And Rufus Porter often, in the rooms that he stenciled and painted murals in, put a sunrise on the east and a sunset in the west. And I'm going to add some of this stroke and blending medium. I'm going to retard the drying process so that I can blend it better together. The gray and the sunset as the two meet. I'm going to put a little white in the middle. Crunchy brush. Be sure to use a fresh brush with each color. The first step is to use the brush to paint the margins of the wall. Okay, I'm going to do the gray, and I'm going to use the roller because it will hasten the job. And I'll bring the gray down to about here, then I'll have some white mixed with a blending medium here, then I'll have the sunrise coming up from here, and we'll blend the whole thing together to try to make it look like a real sunrise. Use the brush in a horizontal motion to smooth out the bubbles left by the roller. Now slip your roller into a plastic baggie, and that will keep it moist until we use it again for the water. As soon as you can, after you've painted the last gray stroke, apply the white, which has been mixed with the blending medium, and while they're both still wet, it will be easier to accomplish the blending. Don't forget to continue your sky to the left of the window on that little strip of wall. If you develop a little bit of a hard edge, you can take that spritzer and spritz a little bit of water on it, and then I'm using now a vertical motion to bring the white up into the gray, and then I'll smooth it out again horizontally. This is where you want to use the cutting brush. It has a beveled edge, and that makes it easy to follow a straight line, such as the horizon line. And then with the large brush, work the pink up into the white above. To mix the watercolor, use the sky color and add just a drop of black to create a color just a couple of shades darker. I'm mixing a small amount, and when that's well mixed into the small amount, I'll add some more gray to create the right color. Actually, the sky's still wet. I need to hit it with a hairdryer. Now the sky is dry, I'm laying in the water's edge with a cutting brush, and will lay in the rest of the water with the roller. One of the things I've noticed in observing Rufus Porter's murals is that he takes the gray and pretty much does it all the way down to the bottom. I'm going to be covering up some of this gray now with the foreground. And I've started by taping again the areas where my paintbrush might go onto a wall where I don't want it to be painted. I couldn't leave that tape on from before because it will adhere to the wall and you won't be able to get it off. You really have to retape fresh each time. I've taken some of the stencils I'm planning to use and I've taped them up. This is actually a stencil. This is the dropout piece, which I outlined so you can see it. And this is the dropout piece of the larger island. And then there's a little orchard and a house. And I'm planning to use those in my scene, so I wanted to get a feel for how they would look on the wall. before I sketch in with the charcoal exactly how I want the foreground to go. A useful technique is to hang a weighted thread for a couple of purposes. First, to mark the center of the mural, which helps you to assess the layout of the design. And secondly, the thread can be retaped by each stencil to make sure they are plumb. Rufus Porter talked in terms of 5 distances. The foreground would be the first, and these hillsides in the back will be the 5th distance. And then I'll have something coming from here, which will be a foreground, and I want it to come down pretty much in front of my trees. So I bring it down like this, and then run it out along the front here. I'm going to have a little cape that comes out here and goes kind of into the 4th distance again. So I'm going to put clouds here above the mountains and also in the tree branches. And then we'll stencil in these 3 islands and put some little ships on the horizon and some larger boats in the foreground. When I cleaned up last time, I scraped some of my leftover paint into little jars to use for this time. And this is the sky color, which is going to be mixed with some white for a slight tint as I put clouds in into the sky and above the mountains. And the other one I saved was the water and also the white that's been mixed with some of the medium. And I'll be using these colors again. Just need a tiny bit of the pink in order to color the clouds. And I'm going to also add some Clyster medium. This will make it semi-transparent. This cloud brush isn't the only way that you can make an effect of clouds. There are other brushes you can use. There are sponges you can use. There are loads of different looking clouds among Rufus Porter's murals, and it bears studying to see what kind of effect you might like to get. I'm preparing all the colors that we'll be using for the foreground. I'm mixing them with more or less white so that they can recede into the background. The lighter colors will seem to be at a distance. And then I've saved some of the gray, which will be used for the mountains. Rufus Porter always pretended that the light source would be the window closest to his work. My window is over here. Because my source of light is coming from the left, I'm going to be highlighting the mountains on the left and darkening them on the right. Just use that same dark gray to put a little shadow under the mountain to delineate it from the sea. I've mixed 3 different shades of yellow using different amounts of white to give the effect of the land masses receding into the distance. This cape is in the 4th distance, and it is the yellow that has the most amount of white added to it. Now I'm highlighting this cape. The window to the left of the cape is not the window that I'm pretending that the light comes from for this mural, but rather the bank of windows on the adjacent wall. The foreground to the left of the window will be the 2nd shade darker. Use the lightest shade of yellow on the spit of land between the mountains and the strong yellow foreground. Using your largest brush and the strongest yellow, lay in the foreground hillside and the closest land in front of the water, all the way to the window. Blend in some bright yellow on the sunny side of the hillside, and some burnt umber in the foreground, which will be the shadow underneath the tree. Mix a little brown with the yellow, and with your striping brush, delineate the edge of the cape. Remember, if you have any portion of your background that you don't like, you can always paint a tree over that. Now that the background is prepared, the fun begins. I'll be using as many as 20 different stencils to develop this scene. The first stencils will be to place the islands. The third and the first island are the same, with a larger island in between. The stenciling process is by and large a circular motion, followed by just a paintbrush style of laying in the green in the middle. I'm drawing this little island because the stencil for the larger island will overlap it. With the stencil still in place, highlight the island. Now the background is done, we'll do a little detail on the islands and begin to develop the rest of the scene. Each island has stenciled a rocky shore. I've placed a piece of blue tape at 3-foot increments because I want to make an S-shaped vine, and I'd like an S between each one, so I use that to guide myself. I'm using a piece of charcoal to sketch in the vines, and later will paint over my lines. Okay, this is brown earth, and I'm going to mix it with some flow medium just to give my brush an extender. I'm using my oval glaze brush to lay in the vine. These are the little ends of the sponge. That's what are going to make the little dots. So I'm going to put it into the paint here, and then I'm going to be sure it's dry. And that will give it the little light touch that we want for the leaves on the vine. Yeah, that's good. With the charcoal, I've sketched in my 2 large foreground trees, and I'm painting the trunks with the dove gray from our background colors. With my script liner, I'm highlighting the left-hand side of the trunk, and I'm bracing my hand on my pinky. Again, I'm laying this foliage in with a sponge, but it could just as well be laid in with an old paintbrush by jabbing the paintbrush onto the wall. I'm using a photograph taken from a house in Maine to guide myself in laying in the elm tree. Mix a yellow-green for the foliage on the sunny side of the tree. In order to sketch in the broken off tree on the right-hand side of my mural, I'm looking at a photograph from the catalog. This is a different tree with different foliage, so I'm laying it in with the blunt end of a square-tipped brush, again while looking at the picture in my catalog for guidance. Next, spray the back sides of the rosebuds and the layers of the village using a repositionable adhesive spray. This stencil is a little too tacky. This is what I do. I put it on my pants and I let it pick up some of the nap. You can cut these rosebuds apart and use them separately to avoid making a mark on the wall with the one that you're not using. A bagged brush will stay moist for a while before you have to wash it at the end of the day. This is just a 2-layer stencil. The easiest way to reposition the green on the red is to simply draw an outline of the bud that will guide you as you're stenciling. Yeah, not pretty. For this mural, I've chosen the 3 buildings at the bottom of the page of our catalog. These are the layers of the village which will be placed on the island. The sunny side, the shaded side, the sunny side of the roofs, the dark side of the roofs and windows, the doors, and the chimneys. In a lot of Porter's murals, you can see the island through the buildings, but by the time we get the other detail over it, it will be less noticeable. You must line up the registration holes perfectly with each successive layer. I have tried to do so, but I have to peel it back and readjust it. Mix a little umber with each color for the shaded sides of the buildings. This is a little handwork applied to the stencils. Every chimney won't have smoke in it, What you need to do though is mix up a little light gray color with some Clyster and twist the brush in your fingers as you apply the smoke. This is a perfect little red colonial house. There are 5 overlays. First we'll do the sunny side, then we'll do the shaded side, then we'll do the sunny side of the roof, the shaded side of the roof and the windows and the foundation, and then at last the little green door. All lined up together with the registration marks here in the corner will give you a perfect little house. It can be used either facing in this direction or it can be turned over and used on the other side. The first thing I will do is turn down the corner so that once it's stuck to the wall and I've finished painting, I can easily remove it by picking up the little tab. This is red earth. It's used quite a bit in the murals. I'll use that for the sunny side of the house. This is another stencil brush that we sell, a Royal stencil brush, and I like it pretty well too. I get right into it and work it up into the bristles. And then I wipe it to make sure that it's rather dry, that there's no gob of paint on the edge. I've painted the first layer. You can see that I moved the plumb line over, and therefore I would be assured that the little house was plumb. Now I won't need that as much because I have these little dots. I'll put them. If you look in the Rufus Porter catalog, you'll see there's quite a bit of detail to this house. There's a white line under the eaves, and I've taken the script brush and some white paint and I've mixed it with some flow medium to help it move. I'm just going to go under the eaves here with a little white. And I'll go around the door and all of the windows underneath the door here. Rufus Porter's directions state that paths are usually of a very light color. This one is going to show that the people in the house go along to the shoreline and travel along possibly to the next neighbor. A little flow medium here. I'm getting my brush into the flow medium and then into the black. This is the little fine point number 3 Jo Sonja Sure Touch brush. After I finished painting this orchard, I felt as if it needed a couple of more trees. I'll mark the little registration holes. 2 of them will be enough. Now I'll highlight the trunk. And shade the dark side of the trunk. Using my 1-inch Sure Touch square wash brush and Turner's Yellow, I'm just going to hit the sunny side of the tree. And raw umber for the shaded side. I'll take a little Clyster with raw umber and put a tiny shadow under each tree. Every homestead should have some cows. I guess I'd like a bigger herd than 4, so I'm going to stencil them again. And you can vary these similar cows by putting their tails in different positions. These are white-faced cattle. And now I'm just using a magic marker to add some horns. Rufus Porter lived many years in Portland, and it's thought by experts that the harbor scenes that he painted were of Portland Harbor. There was a very famous observatory there and some lighthouses, and that's what this little lighthouse depicts. It's easier to clean your stencils if you put them in a bucket of water as you use them. From observing Rufus Porter's work, it appeared that he used a stencil for the hull and then painted in the sails and flags by hand. I took the tracings and broke everything down into stencils for ease, so that now you do the hull and the masts and then the white sails and then the shadows and then the flags all in sequence to make a perfect little boat. I'm using a fine point indelible pen for the rigging rather than to try to make straight lines with a fine brush, but it's your choice. In his murals, I often saw just simply pencil marks that had never been painted over for rigging. There's a little sliver of wall to the left of the window, and on that I'm going to put a very typical Rufus Porter treatment, which is a tall, narrow tree, and it will balance the rest of the mural beautifully. Now I'm using one of the larger flat brushes to lay in the foliage in a herringbone pattern. Here I'm using my scroller and black paint to create the illusion of bark, just by drawing parallel lines down the length of the tree. Using a light color and a little squiggly motion, make pathways from each of the doorways. Using the same color as we used for the doorways, highlight the little primitive rocks on the sunny side. Using the scroller and black paint, create little ripples beneath the island. Using your square-tipped brush, develop the shaded side of the tree with darker foliage over what we've already done in green. The foreground will be filled with cattails and reeds. Using your scroller and Turner's yellow mixed with flow medium, highlight the left-hand side of all of the reeds. As you can see, I don't always spray the back. This is a small stencil and it can easily be accomplished with a couple of pieces of tape. I mixed a little all-purpose sealer with the black on the hull so that when I put the yellow on, black won't mix in with the yellow and make a muddy color. I've mixed up flesh color by using some of this yellow, cadmium yellow and white, and a little bit of red earth. Here comes the white part of the sail as well as the little man's jacket. You will be able to see the mast through the sail. You can always copy from the catalog or a photograph to see how the detail is laid in. Also, the stencils come with directions. He has a little eye like Orphan Annie and wispy hair that blows in the breeze. That's why I think Rufus Porter had a sense of humor. This is the stencil of the fox and the dog. It's a one-color stencil with detail work over it. I stenciled the fox in red earth and the dog in gray. And then over that you'll see the need for putting black socks on the fox's little sharp legs and a white tip on his tail and little pointed ears and a little black nose. And on the dog, a floppy ear and a couple of spots, and then I fatten out the feet with paws and also make a fatter tail. If it's a setter, you could make a sort of a feathered tail and then put an eye and nose on him too. Also, the fox and the dog don't have to be this distance apart from each other. You can spread them apart a little further if you'd like. Along the shoreline, stencil as many poplars as you would like. So I want more than 6 geese. I'm putting in 6 more geese. And my own little story is that the dog is chasing the fox, and that whole disturbance has caused the geese to fly up from the marsh. I have done the fence, but this is how I did it. I just took my scroller and white paint and flow medium, and I did the uprights like this. And I knew that I wanted the gate to be close to the middle. And then actually here I took it off over the edge of the island. And then I just connected things like this. And then later I took a black brush and a fine point and just did the shaded side of each of the posts and the undersides of all of the railings. The blue tape was placed on the lower snapped line so that I wouldn't paint below that. Now I'm going to remove the blue tape, but I'm using it first as a guide to put up the painter's tape. And then I will stencil a color where the blue tape has been to just finish off the bottom of the mural. I'm burnishing the edges of the painter's tape with a credit card just so they'll be good and tight to the wall to prevent leakage of paint underneath the painter's tape. I've seen these stripes finished on Rufus Porter's work in black and in red and in green. This time I've chosen a hooker's green mixed with French blue and green oxide because I thought I'd like the look of it. Rufus Porter talked in terms of 5 distances. The first distance would be the foreground from which grow these cattails and where the trees, the major trees, are rooted in the foreground. The second distance would be where the geese are and the first little boat. The third distance would be the islands. The fourth distance would be the back of the ocean and this little boat and the cape. And then the fifth distance would be the mountains and the clouds. And you will find that his instructions will tell you to mix a little bit more white with the background colors to make them seem to recede into the background. Of course, the technique of viewing the scene through the reeds and the cattails and beyond the huge tree does put things in perspective so that everything recedes to the back. Now I'm going to sand this entire mural and we'll see if we can give it an aged look. This is a medium grit sandpaper and I will only use it in a horizontal direction. Never go vertically. This happens to be a sunrise, and I was sitting in my living room looking to the east, and the sky was exactly this color the other morning. So I think we got that right. The last thing I'm going to do is wipe it all down with a damp rag. Vinny. For inspiration, here are photographs of historic walls painted by Porter and his students, followed by murals painted by custom stencilers and homeowners like yourself.